Welcome to Central Bank Central. I'm Kathleen Hayes. Well, President Trump gave his long-awaited State of the Union address overnight. The press is saying things like he may have heralded a bright new golden age for the US and the US economy, but voters aren't buying it. They are still pretty sour on what's going on now. So I want to get right to my very special guest. That's Douglas Holtz Eakin. He founded the American Action Forum back in 2009. He was the chief economist of the President's Council of Economic Advisors when he was the senior staff economist from 1989 to 1990. He was also the director of the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. That'll help you understand why he knows so much about the budget. And from 2007 to 2008, he was director of domestic and economic policy when John McCain ran for president. Doug, it's great to have you back.
Great. Thanks for having me.
I think it was interesting. You got part of your forecast for what would happen today. You thought maybe, or last night, I should say, in POTUS, uh, was that it would be a short address. And we know it was the longest on history. You were dead right, though. Dead right on the kinds of things he would say and the kind of questions he would leave. President Trump would not say things that were going to move the dial on the kind of issues you and others are pushing for, right? And one thing that's pretty clear too, it was very combative. Uh, uh, Trump did not try to build bridges, find a common way ahead, but Democrats were kind of right on the other side of that coin, weren't they? Cold shoulder strategy and plotted for nothing, etc. So what is this promise? This kind of, I don't know, the States of the Union address often don't make that much difference, but for at this
Right.
point of what Trump is doing now, um, how is that going to play out for the kind of tough budget debates and goals that are going to be in front of Congress now, and the White House going to be dealing with too?
I don't think it contributes to that at all. He's now, delivered multiple States of the Union addresses over two different terms as president, and he's not yet uttered the words deficit and debt in them. So he's not going to do the work necessary to put us on a sustainable fiscal trajectory. That work's going to be left to the next president and to the second next Congress after that. So. That's very disappointing to me. No question about it. I consider that one of our top domestic policy threats and one of the big challenges that we have to undertake. And it's only 7 years till the Social Security Trust Fund exhausts, and we have to deal with that piece of the social safety net. The highway trust, or the hospital trust fund is going to exhaust. We'll have to deal with that piece, and we're making no progress on these at a time when I really think we should be. And that's just the absence of leadership. I think there's no question about it. So that's a disappointment, but it's not a surprise. He's never shown any appetite for this kind of work, and he continues to not.
Well, of course, if someone from the other side, you could go back to Doge, right? You could go back to Republicans trying to say, well, we're going to start in the second term getting rid of government waste, trimming down the workforce. So I'm sure if some one of those people were there from the Republican side, uh, and certainly from the Republican side of the House, what would they be saying about that?
Well, I mean, there's certainly a good argument to be made that you shouldn't waste the taxpayers' money. Absolutely. There's no good argument to be made that somehow this is the source of our deficits. We hear a lot about what the Somalis did in Minnesota and how this is an enormous amount of fraud and this is why we were spending so much money. Well, the entire program is $30 billion dollars a year. The deficit was last time I checked was 1.7 trillion. So that's not where the deficit's coming from. So if you want to deal with the deficit, you have to deal with two programs, Social Security and Medicare, which over the next 10 years will be more than one half of all non-interest spending. That's where the money is. And they grow faster than everything else. And they grow faster than revenue grows. So arithmetically, if you want to narrow the gap, you have to get those programs to grow more slowly. That's where the hard work is.
Well, I want to move on some more about what Trump said about the economy,
Yeah.
inflation, et cetera. But let's start with the Democrats and Republicans. Um, in a nutshell, what is the Republican side now? Remind us all, please. What is the Democrat side now? Because on both sides, you find people who don't really seem inclined to take steps mutually that they could both agree to, and that's why you don't see them moving forward.
We're not seeing any real cross-party cooperation. The only piece of legislation this president cared about was the reconciliation bill last summer. He has said on the record recently, I got everything I need for 4 years. I don't need Congress." And he acts unilaterally a lot. You know this. I know this. So if you're going to act unilaterally, you don't need the Democrats to help you, and you don't do any outreach. And he doesn't do any outreach. So what he's done is set the tone for the midterms, given some messaging instructions by implication to his congressional caucuses, and that's what last night accomplished. But it's not a policy or governance moment, that's for sure.
So, in terms of when he talked about his policies are working, and I think many people would maybe start by looking at something like inflation high, still being tamed potentially. Really, though, it's the Federal Reserve's potential remit, right, to get that done. So, do you think that's something that is all similarly going to be just kind of pushed to the side on Congress right now, and not really making it part of the focus, or even where how it's going to affect their own policies and how it affects the budget?
So, first, just on the numbers, like, I hate to be a dull person, but I am. Uh, if you go back to December of 2024 and look at year over year in core inflation as measured by the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed's preferred measure, it was at 3%. In December of 2025, 1 year later, it was 3%. So we saw zero progress on inflation in 2025. Now, did the Fed go to sleep for a year? No. They made some progress and then had to do a U-turn, and you can largely pin that on the tariffs. So the fiscal and monetary policies hardly were working hand in hand. They're fighting each other, and the result was not much progress on inflation. I think that should be a cautionary tale to this White House. People hate inflation. It is one of the most powerful forces economically, but also politically. It hits everyone in the economy. It's not like unemployment, which is a very bad thing, but it's especially bad if it's you. If it's not you, well, no one likes unemployment, but it's not so personal. Everyone gets hit by the inflation, so it has big political implications. If they start running up to the midterms and inflation is still rising, they're going to have a horrible problem. And he has, made it. The president has made it his, clear goal to cut rates, not to fight the inflation. So he's positioned it to make a potentially large policy error. I'd be nervous about that. I really think they've misjudged the inflation from a political point of view. I think it's a real risk for them, and they should, instead of fighting the Fed, just turn them loose to get it back to 2%, which they can do and will do if they're left to their own devices. So inflation is a big concern. I think the other concern that they have to acknowledge, if not publicly, have some thought for how it's going to work. The economy didn't exactly finish the year on a strong note. Fourth quarter GDP was 1.4%. We all know it got knocked down by the government shutdown. The CBO puts that number at 1.1 percentage points, so maybe it's at 2.5. 2.5 is not exactly gangbusters. It's not the golden age of the U.S. economy. And inside that number, durable goods purchases fell. That's not a strong economy. Non-durables grew at 0.9%. That's not exactly huge growth. Services, 3.4%. You worry about the tariffs figuring into that. You worry about the strength of the households. What's always struck me is if you look at the data for the third and fourth quarter, real disposable income did not grow. Zero. It's dead flat. 6 months in the U.S. economy and people's cash flow didn't get better. That's not a great foundation for 2026. And so I'm a little less, sort of confident of the outlook than you heard from the president last night. I'd be nervous about the household sector.
So, Doug, you touched on tariffs. And again, you're a budget expert, but you obviously also are someone watching the economy very closely. Ultimately, that's a big part of what's going to happen to the budget, right? And what the two parties can do to get together or not. Tariffs, where are they now? Trump says they were a success. He also focuses on the fact that the revenues from the tariffs will help bring down income taxes. So, again, as a budget expert, as a tax guy, all that, what do you see?
So business as usual in the United States right now is spend $7 trillion, raise 5 trillion in revenue, and borrow two. So that's a $2 trillion a year deficit ballpark. And the tariffs he had in place prior to the Supreme Court striking down the IEEPA tariffs raised about 250 billion, a little north of 250 billion dollars a year. So that's real money, but that's not deficit closing money. That there's no way the deficit goes away at that level of tariffs. So do you want to raise them enough to close the deficit or not? I think the answer to that's no, because uh, tariffs are far more regressive than the income tax. They are a huge distortion in the economy, and they're hard to administer and comply with. And so, if you're going to raise substantial amounts of revenue, you want to use some broad-based tax like an income tax. So I've always thought the let's rely on these tariffs to get rid of the income tax is going the wrong direction. I think you're making a mistake there. Now, there is the economic implications as well. So you put in place those tariffs, and they're a headwind to the economy. They're going to slow growth, and that's going to reduce revenues. So did they really raise $250 billion, or net of the growth impact, was it something considerably less? I think I find it hard to get excited about the budgetary implications of tariffs. That's not in my view, a good justification for their existence.
Okay, let's look at the budget broadly and more specifically, because again, this is something you and your team cover oh so closely. And when you look at the two sides, Democrats and Democrats, is there a middle ground, right? Is there a group of Dems and Repubs that you could see under certain circumstances getting closer to something that could pass?
So there has been a middle ground for quite some time. And that middle ground has been we're not touching the entitlements. And that's been both Republicans and Democrats. President Biden said that. President Trump has said that. Um, but that needs to go away because, as I mentioned earlier, the Social Security Trust Fund will exhaust in 7 years. And when that happens, by law, you can only pay benefits with money in the trust fund. And each year we will have just the payroll taxes for that year. And that's enough to pay 75% of the benefits, but not 100%. So we're looking at cutting benefits by 25% across the board to people in retirement. That's never going to happen. You know that, I know that. But what that means is we're going to do Social Security reform. The thing that everyone has said we will not do, we should not do, we are going to do. And indeed, we should do it as soon as we can, because if you're 55 and you want to retire in 10 years, in between there's going to be Social Security reform. So you don't know what you're going to get. And we should allow people to make a decent plan. They're going to retire. They should know what the pension system will deliver to them. So there's an imperative to fix it. And that's different from an imperative to not touch it. So as that day gets closer, people start to realize what's going on. They're going to go to the town hall instead of threatening their congressman if he or she suggests Social Security reform. They're going to say, "When are you going to do this? When am I going to know the deal? When am I going to know what my money is?" That's a good dynamic, and we need that. Some interesting things that will happen as a result. Number one, anyone running for president in 2028, they think this will happen on their watch. If you're going to serve 2 terms, this is on yours. So they would be well served to mention this to the American public, to say something as pointed as, "I pledge to work with Congress to preserve the Social Security system for the future." But that's completely unlike anything we've seen recently. Someone running with a policy issue in mind and flagging it for the voters. Second thing that's interesting about Social Security is you can't do it on party line votes. You can't use reconciliation. You have to actually do it in regular order. They're going to have to talk to each other. They're going to have to somehow get to yes on a really big program. That's a completely different environment than the one we've been in. And so I expect there to be pitched battles over the details of the reform, lots of disagreements on what is the best route forward. But I think that's a good thing to have that discussion and to know you have to get something done. Getting something done is not at a premium right now. Nothing gets done. They just attack each other. Getting something done means you lay down your arms periodically and get some work done. So that'll be good.
Well, there frequently in the past, it's taken some kind of crisis. It's taken some kind of financial crisis to
Yeah.
move Republicans and Democrats to even begin to get to the middle. This is one of the reasons people, investors, people in financial markets are concerned because this could be potentially affect bond markets, affect the Federal Reserve. Okay. And this is another thing you've watched closely for years. And so what do you see there? And are there key players here that you would say, is it a John Thune, who's been on Wall Street? Is there somebody you think in this mix, Republican or Democrat or both, that you think might be someone to help push this in a direction, maybe when people start seeing that the tensions are getting better on the market side?
So a lot of people spend a lot of time waiting for the markets to signal the apocalypse, and you know, I'm asked a lot, how long can we go like this? And the truth is, I don't know, and I also don't think we should try to find out. Um, Instead, we should proactively take care of our programs, which are important, and the people who rely on them, and put our fiscal house in order in the process. So the crisis I'm trying to focus on is the one where the checks don't go out. Now, that proved to be a big crisis back in the 80s, and they put together the Greenspan Commission and said, you've got to find a solution for this because we can't let this happen. And people forget this, but the Greenspan Commission delivered their recommendations, and Congress enacted them with 1 month before the checks stopped. So they were right to the last minute. Do I think we can do better than that? Yes. Do I expect us to do better than that? No, not really. I think we'll probably run it pretty close to 7 years. But in the process, the threat of that will be a crisis enough to generate action. And that's good. It's the right kind of crisis. Their jobs are on the line, not the future of the U.S. economy. Fine.
So, what are you watching in terms of the midterms and the things that could happen as we get closer to that, that could actually kind of force not just Republicans in Congress and Democrats in Congress to start moving forward on this, but even the president himself and whoever looks like they might be lining up to be the Democratic candidate for the Oval Office?
Well, as we go into the midterms, as I mentioned earlier, I worry about an upside surprise on inflation. I think that's a non-zero risk, and it's tough to wring the inflation out of an economy, and we're learning that. The second thing that you worry about is some sort of secular kind of thing, and this year it seems to be healthcare costs. And so, if we get some additional reports on healthcare costs, healthcare bankruptcies, anything that looks like that, the potential for them to sort of do something is limited. They don't have a way to get to agreement, so the president will likely do something unilateral. And his taste so far has been, price fixing and things of that sort. So I'm worried about that being a bad news story as they try to patch themselves together to get through the midterms. Past that, I'm looking at the same things everyone else is. I pay attention when the rating agencies downgrade the U.S. and ask myself why. And what's been interesting there is we saw S&P back in 2011, Fitch more recently say, we're going to downgrade the U.S. because their politics are so bad, they can't manage their finances. When Moody's downgraded the U.S., they didn't say anything like that. You know what they said? You have too much debt and interest takes too much of your revenue. So we're now from the process is the problem to the problem is the problem. That's a significant change and something that I'm not happy about. And I don't think anyone else should be.
A couple other issues, maybe a little lightning round here in terms of sentiment, in terms of voter inclinations, and single family homes, homes that aren't affordable. The president's touted stopping corporation from buying up single family homes. Will that happen? Is that something that could affect actually the housing market, affect the supply? Is this something that could be a popular or a strong focus for voters that could, again, maybe sway people towards the Trump side and the
Uh,
Republican side?
As it turns out, this is a place where Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Donald Trump agree. So I don't think they move any voters with this. I think they talk about it and make voters feel good that people care about their woes. But this doesn't, there's no real research that suggests this had a significant impact on housing markets. So, it's more of a political band-aid than a real policy solution. There's not much the federal government has in its quiver that can address the housing market. In the end, you need more supply. The best solution there is to let high prices generate more supply. High prices tend to cure themselves. So it just takes longer than anyone likes. And that's what's going to happen.
Well, how about some of these issues that are not have nothing to do with the budget, but they have everything to do with voter sentiment? It'd be something like what's happened with ICE. We look at what's happened in Minnesota. We look at voter ID cards, those kinds of things. Again, as a guy who's watched all this for a long
Yeah.
time, who worked on a presidential
Um,
campaign, how do you assess those working out? Is that going to continue to be very divisive? Are there areas there where Republicans maybe do have some advantage? Or do you think the support for all these kinds of things on the Democrat side are going to win the day?
So, on deportations, immigration controls, that whole policy area, uh, what they really will do is harm Republican turnout. Um, they took the deportations, which were an 80% favorable, 20% unfavorable issue, where they had even lots of Democrats supporting it, and turned it into one that's now almost a reverse. So the conduct of it turned out to be a loser. The Democrats now are fully opposing. They're going to fully oppose on all fronts. But the real problem is enthusiasm among Republicans goes down. They don't feel like going out to support the candidates. That's a problem in general in the midterms, and this is making it worse.
So I guess in terms of also what are you going to be watching? What are you going to be watching to show, oh, things are moving this direction, are not moving in the direction? And again, I really like to see on both sides, who do you think the who would you see as leaders that could move things that way? Um, you know, in it rather than just going right down to the wire with midterm elections that are going to be potentially close, potentially not, and then ultimately down the road, what it means for getting the kind of government back in place in Congress, in the White House, that can go ahead and make. I want to come back to the budget because that is your
Yeah.
life's work, right?
Um, so I'm looking to see if the Republicans bet pays off. They bet the ranch that by structuring the reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, to provide about $1,000 a person on average higher refunds and some tax cuts in the spring of 2026, that they will get improved sentiment. The cash flows will improve household spending and thus growth in the economy. Um, and they will go into the midterms with economic wins at their back. That's been the bet. Now, that could turn out. That could turn out to be right, and then it gets undone by tariff city levies. It could be wrong, and so that's the big bet that's going to determine how well the midterms go for Republicans, and it's going to be on economic grounds. So well worth watching, and we'll know the answer in June, July, and August, far before the election. Um, After that, you then start picking through the potential candidates in 2028. Who's going to emerge on both the Republican and Democratic side to be at the top of the ticket? Right now, the obvious candidates on the Republican side are the sitting vice president, always a likely prospect, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, NSC director. Those are two most likely ones to appear on the ticket, and RFK Jr. is not beyond the realm of possibility, taking another run at, see how that turns out. So those three stand out to me. On the Democratic side, it's an enormous field, and they have to do some quick decision making. Do we take last time's candidates, the former vice president, off the table or not? Huge decision to make. And then Gavin Newsom and a horde of others interested in filling in that gap if they do. So that's worth taking a look at.
All right. Well, Douglas Holtz Eakin, you have taken a look at a lot of things with us today. I thank you so very much. I know you're always busy, but certainly on a week like this, after the President's State of the Union address, I know you've got a lot of people who want to talk to you. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
talking to me.
Good to have you.
Okay. Douglas Holtz Eakin, let me remind you, is the founder of the American Action Forum. I'm Kathleen Hayes, and this is Central Bank Central.